Cryptocurrency is really starting to pick up steam nowadays. With Bitcoin continually breaking new records in terms of how much it's worth in US dollars, if one is not careful, they could start to get a serious case of FOMO. But what are cryptocurrencies? What is the technology that is used to create them?
Can somebody please explain it in a way that's not hard to understand?
Well, we're going to try in this video. So be sure to gently, lovingly, tenderly caress that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and let's dive right in. But before we do, you're watching Finance Squared, and I'm your host, Derek West. And on this channel, we love to talk about all things personal finance, including some of the latest trends in digital currencies, namely cryptocurrencies. But when discussing cryptocurrencies, things can get really complex really quickly. So let's all agree to try and keep things nice and simple. One of the reasons why cryptocurrencies in general are hard to understand is because oftentimes it goes into the back end of the technology. Just leave people with their eyes glazed over, wanting to click off onto that cat video in the recommended column, or head on over to TikTok to watch their favorite lip-syncing teens rip off famous songs. The unfortunate thing about it is that cryptocurrencies are complex, but so is fiat money. You know, that $20 bill that you have in your pocket right now. You don't necessarily bother yourself with all the details on how that money is created, how central banks play a critical role in supply and demand of the US dollar, and how and why the US dollar has any value whatsoever, or how the centrality of the US dollar affects the ability of you to pay for things that you want, like the smartphone that you're more than likely watching this video on. However, to be motivated to switch over to another technology, that might take a little more convincing. And to do that, we will briefly go over why cryptocurrency, essentially values on a spreadsheet. We'll try and understand why that works, why they work as currency. But to do that, you need to understand what a blockchain is. And to understand what a blockchain is, think of an old spreadsheet, a plain old Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, or if you're too cheap to upgrade on your Mac, a numbers spreadsheet. Now that spreadsheet can contain any information that you want on it. A list of groceries, your spending habits, your sports scores. You can keep track and keep tabs of just about anything. Well, a spreadsheet is really just a consumer-friendly database. And databases just organize information and make it easier for both humans and machines to keep track of all that information and make them useful. A lot of information coming at you all at once can just seem like noise. But if you categorize it and classify it, putting it next to other information of the same type, then you make that information useful for tracking trends and seeing patterns, and for storing the information for efficient retrieval for future use. That is essentially what a database is, and that is what a spreadsheet is. A blockchain is a type of database, but it's not like your standard database or spreadsheet. It's a new type of database. So in the spreadsheet that you use today, you typically store that information in a table format, with the columns defining what the type of data is, like monthly cost, for example, and the row representing the instance of that data. Let's say like $3,000 for tires, random thing I'm thinking of here. It's the same in a standard database. The difference being databases are designed for many users and machine processes to have access to them at almost the same time. But blockchains store their information using a different methodology. Each blockchain, depending on the implementation, store information into what is called a block. Conveniently named, wouldn't you agree? But that is essentially a chunk of data of a certain size. When that block is filled up, another block of that data is added to the end of the original block, essentially chaining those blocks together. Clear as mud so far? Glad you're paying attention. Stick with me, we're getting into the heart of it. In our spreadsheet example and in a standard database, you can enter in information into how many rows you want. As long as you have the hardware, technically, you could have an infinite amount of information in that spreadsheet or in the database. And in addition to that, you can update that information in that spreadsheet whenever you want. So if you're on row 1000 and you think to yourself, let me replace each row with different values for whatever reason, you could do that. In a blockchain, like I mentioned earlier, the size of the block is limited. When you reach the size, you add another block to the end. And depending on the implementation, the block that you made previously is set in stone and it can't be changed. This becomes powerful when implemented in a distributed fashion. Now, what do technical wizards mean when they say distributed? That means that the information or system is spread out in multiple instances. To make it plain, if I were talking about a distributed database, I would mean a database that is installed on computers, usually powerful computers designed for data storage or data servers all across the globe, and not on a computer sitting under my desk somewhere. So for the purposes of our discussion, a distributed blockchain is simply a type of database that is installed and running on multiple computers across the globe. You'll often hear these computers referred to as nodes in the network. Each node has a full history of every transaction that has ever occurred in the blockchain. Now, again, that depends on the implementation, but it doesn't have to be any more complex than that for the purposes of understanding the technology behind cryptocurrency. Here's the kicker. The blockchain can be used for more than just cryptocurrencies. They can be used to store records of other contracts like stock purchases or even store product inventories, or to securely vote with a record of each and every vote tracked back to the individual voter. a use case that might be relevant in today's day and age. The most mainstream use case thus far is currency and transaction tracking of that same currency. Now, there are other more complex details to understand about blockchains that allow for it to be an ideal technology for cryptocurrency. Things like transaction verification, full transparency of transactions, mining, forking, etc. But all that information is way too complex and techy for a mass audience. I'll point you to a great article from Investopedia if you want to check out even more details on it. But let's just say at this point in the video, you should know everything you need to know about blockchain and how it enables cryptocurrency. Let's take a look at some of the top cryptocurrencies to date. So the thing about cryptocurrencies is that they each are implemented in different ways. And like a lot of things in life, they each have their strengths and they each have their weaknesses. Each of them offers the holder of the cryptocurrency a specific advantage. Let's start off with Bitcoin, the granddaddy of them all. The funny thing about Bitcoin is that nobody really knows who created it. It was launched in January 2009 by some guy who called himself Satoshi Nakamoto. But nobody can really confirm if that is his real name, or even if he really existed. But whoever it was that created it, they based it off of a paper published in 1991 by two researchers, Stuart Haber and W. Scott Stornetta. The original intention was to come up with a way where document timestamps could not be tampered with. But Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that uses blockchain as a means to transparently record a ledger of payments. One of the ways people use to describe the benefits of blockchain is by comparing it to other types of finance, typically banks. So we'll do that here as well. Banks, typically brick and mortar banks, are open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays. Some banks are open on weekends, but with limited hours. All banks are closed on banking holidays. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is open 24/7. 365 days a year. You can get your money out of Bitcoin whenever you want. Now, banks, on the other hand, have transaction fees for card payments. Now, this fee varies based on the card and is not paid by the user directly. And some fees are paid to the payment processor by stores and are usually charged per transaction. The effect of this fee can sometimes make the cost of goods and services rise. Your typical check can cost anywhere between $1 and $30 depending on your bank. Transfers can also cost up to $3 when sending to external accounts. Outgoing domestic wire transfers can cost as much as $25. Outgoing international wire transfers can cost as much as $45. Bitcoin has variable transaction fees determined by miners and users. This fee can range between $0 and $50, but users have the ability to determine how much of a fee they're willing to pay, creating an open marketplace where if the user sets their fee too low, their transaction may not be processed. Now, with banks, transaction speed can be variable. For card payments, it can take 24 to 48 hours. For checks, it's 24 to 72 hours to clear. For wire transfers, 24 to 48 hours to clear. Bank transfers are typically not processed on weekends or bank holidays. Bitcoin transactions can take as little as 15 minutes and as much as over an hour, depending on network congestion. Banks have know your customer rules. These are basically rules that make it necessary for banks to understand who their customer is in such a way to ensure that they're not laundering money or creating bribes or other things. In other words, banks are legally required to record a customer's identification prior to opening an account. With Bitcoin, anyone or anything can participate in the Bitcoin network with no identification. In theory, even an entity equipped with artificial intelligence could participate. The Know Your Customer rules also apply for bank transfers. With Bitcoin, all you need is an internet connection and a mobile phone, and that's it. In terms of privacy, your bank account information is stored on the bank's private servers, and they're held by you, the client. But bank account privacy is limited to how secure the bank's servers are and how well the individual users are and how good the individual users are at securing their own information. If the bank's servers were to be compromised, then the individual users' accounts will be compromised as well. Bitcoin can be as private as the user wishes. All Bitcoin is traceable, but it's impossible to establish who has ownership of Bitcoin if it was purchased anonymously. Now, if Bitcoin was purchased on a Know Your Customer exchange, then the Bitcoin is directly tied to the holder of the Know Your Customer exchange account. Assuming you, the client, practice solid internet security measures like using secure passwords and two-factor authentication, a bank account's information is only as secure as the bank server that contains the client information. The Bitcoin network, however, the larger it grows, the more secure it gets. The level of security a Bitcoin holder has with their own Bitcoin is entirely up to them. One of the many reasons why people recommend that people use cold storage to hold their Bitcoins. A topic for another day and another video. Any large amount of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency really should be stored in cold storage, that is, on hardware that's not connected to the internet at all. Now, in terms of transaction, banks reserve the right to deny transactions for a variety of reasons. Banks also reserve the right to freeze accounts. If your bank notices purchases in an unusual location or for unusual items, those purchases and transactions can be denied or not validated. With Bitcoin, however, the Bitcoin network itself does not dictate how Bitcoin is used in any shape or form. Users can transact Bitcoin how they see fit, but those users, if they're acting legally, should also adhere to the guidelines of their country or region. Now, governments can easily track people's bank accounts and seize those assets within them for a variety of reasons, both legal and extra legal. But if Bitcoin is used anonymously, governments would have a hard time tracking it down to seize it. And that really is just the beginning. There's so much more knowledge to be gained on cryptocurrency, which is one of the reasons why you should subscribe to Finance Squared and enable post notifications. Because topics like this are hard, very hard, as a matter of fact, to present in such a way that they are both informative and entertaining. And we here strive to hit the right balance. I hope we nailed it, but be sure to look out for more videos on this topic very soon. But of course, we do have other videos on topics involving personal finance, entrepreneurship, and so much more on our channel, and many more are planned. Just remember, a goal without a plan is a wish. A goal with a plan and no action is a wish list. Take action on your personal finances by considering the merits of cryptocurrency, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.